Sean, how did you get into trucking?
Well, we're going back about 17 years now, and you know, growing up, I always kind of looked at trucks, admired them, loved looking at them, and apparently someone's trying to move next to us. But growing up, I never actually wanted to be a trucker. I wanted to be a mechanic. I wanted to work on cars, fix them, help people get going down the road. Other parts of my life kind of prevented me from doing that, so I eventually found different avenues. I worked in lumber yards, I did warehouse work, and eventually, after I got my license, got my first car, absolutely fell in love with driving. So, you know, it took me a couple of years to finally convince myself to do it, but I figured, you know, why not get paid to drive? And it was always my dream once I got to that point, and sorry, frog in my throat. Eventually got to the point where I applied for the funding to get my license, and everything just kind of flew from there. The school that I went through helped me get my first job. I was there for almost a year before I went and tried something else. I started off doing reefers, hauling groceries. It wasn't quite exactly what I wanted, but back then you had to put your time in and kind of do what you had to in order to be able to kind of work your way up through the industry. Because back then you still needed experience before companies would actually hire you. Now, because of the shortage of drivers and the ability of training now through the schools, it's a lot easier for guys to be able to come out of school and pretty much get whatever job they want. Unfortunately, I didn't have that luxury. So you got to put in your time. So I did the city P&D where I lived. I'm from Edmonton, Alberta, Canada. So I'm down here trucking. I'm actually doing a reset on my way back home. There isn't a whole lot of differences between Canadian and American trucking. The biggest differences comes within the hours of service and rules and regulations. And the biggest differences there is that in the US, you guys are on a 14-hour drive time, or 14-hour day, which in Canada we're on that as well, but we have, what we're allowed to do is we have a 16-hour window where during that 14 hours, we're allowed to take 2 hours off during the day at any point, so long as they're minimum half an hour breaks, and it's not going to eat into our 14 hours of work day. Whereas down here, unfortunately, when you start your clock, you have 14 hours to complete whatever you're doing, and if you realistically think about it, you have 13 and a half because you still have to take a half-hour break after 8 hours, which I come to find out that they're actually changing come September.
Wait, say that again?
They're changing that half an hour break come September.
To what?
You still have to do the break, but it no longer has to be on off duty. You can now classify it as on duty.
So they finally figured out people weren't taking a break; they were just doing what they wanted to do. Anyway.
Yeah.
Thank you. Like, yeah.
But and another thing is that it's you have to take a half-hour break after 8 hours of driving, not work day. 8 hours of driving.
Okay, now we got something with that.
Yeah.
Okay, if you're really driving straight A, that straight A can wear you out, depending on the person. So, okay, that's okay.
But, so now it's not going to start 8 hours after you start your book. Now, you have to have your half hour. Say if you work 3 hours in the morning and you don't start driving until then, well, that 8 hours is going to put you to 11 hours into your day. But you don't have to take a half-hour break until that 11th hour.
Hey, now we're getting something. Okay.
So now they're starting to clue in, and they've also changed that starting September, you can now split your sleeper berth. Okay. So long as one is minimum 2 hours and one is minimum 7. So you can do an 8 and 2 or 7 and 3.
That'll work.
Yeah. For a lot of guys that will, especially guys that run during the day and you want to avoid rush hour traffic. Rush hour, down here, I absolutely love your rush hour traffic.
That doesn't count. This is North Dakota. You talking about?
Oh, no. I'm talking Houston. I'm talking Dallas. I'm talking Atlanta. Compared to the way we do rush hour, Your rush hour is completely different. You guys, well, with the exception of Atlanta, I'll give it that.
Atlanta's its own monster.
Yeah, that's its own monster. But every other city you go to during rush hour, 99% of the time, traffic is at least flowing.
Yeah, it's like clockwork.
Yeah.
It's like clockwork.
Back home, yeah, no, you hit rush hour traffic and everything just comes to a crawl. And you're literally doing what you guys would be, I'd say at most 3 miles an hour.
Yeah.
So you're literally just crawling and drives us absolutely nuts. So now, if you can take advantage of skipping that time, it makes perfect sense. So, but as for actual differences for trucking, like the load I've got on, I'm taking it back to Canada. I've driven I started off in Atlanta, surprisingly, and then I went to just outside of Charlotte, North Carolina, and then I went to just outside of Little Rock, Arkansas, and then the last pickup I had was in Wichita, Kansas. And like, we do the same things down here as we do up there. The only differences is coming back to the rules. You guys only allow 11 hours of driving during the day. We can drive 13. We still only have a 14-hour work day, but we can drive 13. And like, that's really the only differences in trucking. Other than that, the other big difference, which I absolutely despise, but unfortunately there's nothing that I can do to control it, is the pay for the drivers. You guys get paid so much better down here. Absolutely. And the biggest reason for that is because you guys get paid in US dollars. We get paid in Canadian. So again, for us traveling down here, in a way makes sense, but in a way doesn't, because at the end of the day, we're still losing money because of the exchange rate, which sucks.
What if you, and that's because you're a Canadian citizen, so
yeah,
it doesn't matter if you work for a U.S. company.
No. Well, if I worked for a U.S. company, I would in fact then get paid in U.S. funds. It would still get converted over to Canadian at the end of the day, but working for a U.S. company, I'd still have to go and get at least minimum a work visa, if not a green card, in order to work for a U.S. company. I just can't come down here and work. Unfortunately, I don't have dual citizenship and I don't have a treaty card. So I'm kind of SOL on that one. But as for pay, like the majority of companies, especially now, are offering anywhere from, what, we'll say 55 to 70 cents US a mile.
That'll work. 50 cents a mile, average, what, 2,500, maybe 3 if you
really push, yeah. Okay. So that's what you guys are offering down here.
Yeah.
I'm getting paid currently 46 cents a mile, Canadian. So if you convert that to US, if I was being paid in US funds, I'd only be being paid about 33 cents US a mile.
Not doing it.
Exactly. You guys can't. You guys can't afford to. Unfortunately, because of the way that the dollar is between the US and Canadian dollar, that's how we end up getting screwed at the end of the day. Which really, really sucks. But don't get me wrong, I could still make a living, I could still pay my bills, I could still afford to go out and do things on my off time. I still live a life.
Yeah.
So it's not strictly based on trucking.
Yeah.
But like, I've still got a family at home. Granted, we're not married, but I've still got a girlfriend. She's got a kid. I've got a kid from a previous marriage. You know, it all works.
But if it was a little bit more, you could do more with it.
Oh yeah, I definitely wouldn't have to work as much, so that I could spend more time with my family. And with this coronavirus being going on,
thank you. Take a time.
Unfortunately, with the coronavirus that we have going on right now, Because I'm traveling back and forth, and because there are kids at home, I haven't been home.
For 14 days, so...
Technically, yes, that's what it's supposed to be when I return home. But because I'm traveling back and forth, and there are kids at home, my wife's on the older side, and just on the off chance that I do have something, I have no symptoms or anything else, haven't shown any signs, I don't want to take that chance on going home and giving it to them. So, unfortunately, during this time, since they've done this whole self-distancing, home quarantine crap, I haven't been home. I've driven through home long enough to see my girlfriend in her vehicle while I swap out meals from the back of her car so that I can keep going, so that I can keep working. That's as close as I've gotten to in almost 3 months. You know, it takes a toll on us out here. Like, for you guys, so long as you're staying within the country, it's not so bad. You guys can still go home at the end of the day or the end of the week. But, you know, granted, this was my choice to do this, and I absolutely love driving in the U.S. So that's a sacrifice that I made, and my girlfriend supported me. You know, we're working through this together. Yeah, we've had our hardships, but, you know, it's not the easiest life for everybody to live. And even before the coronavirus happened, you know, I was still gone 2 to 3 weeks at a time. I'd be home for 2 or 3 days and I'd be gone again. So even to have a relationship based around, we'll say at most 4 days a month, for a lot of people is almost impossible. I give my girlfriend a ton of credit for sticking around the last 5 years during my job. But I was doing this long before we got together, and I'll be doing it long after if we ever split apart. This is just what I love to do. You know, I may not always agree with the companies that I work for. I may not always agree with the people that I work with. But my love for trucking will never change. And honestly, if I die behind the wheel, at least I'll die doing something that I love. I can't go wrong with that. But, you know, it's not an easy job either. Especially, well, now that e-logs came into play, it's a hell of a lot nicer. But before that, when we were running paper logs, we were cheating all the time.
Of course, because all right, go ahead.
It didn't really matter what you did. Your days, a normal work day for a person is supposed to be 8.5, 9 hours. Granted, we have 14 hours that we're legally allowed to work. There's a lot of days. There's actually, I won't even say days. There were a lot of years where I was lucky to get 4 hours of sleep a night. And that wasn't even pushing. That was just getting shit done. You get stuck at a shipper. You get stuck at a receiver.
You get stuck in Washington, D.C., especially your first time ever going there. You're like, okay, all right, I'm about to run out of hours and ain't nowhere to park at.
That's right.
I've ran out of hours and there's nowhere to park at.
Yeah.
Well, I can get it just as soon as I can get off this house.
That's right. You know, and the oil field is a perfect example. I was still running paper logs in the oil field before it took a crash. And my company ended up closing its doors. And there were a lot of days there where we were working minimum 20 hours a day.
It's just the oil field, man.
Exactly. It doesn't stop.
It does not stop.
So, you know, granted, the money was phenomenal. Absolutely loved that aspect of it. My body didn't like the rest of it, but we persevered. And it's unfortunate that things have had to get as bad as they did for things to change. Because things never should have had to get as bad as they did before these changes came into effect. You know, like the old guys that are retiring or have retired never used to run logbooks. They used to just run until they got tired. Go to bed, get up, go again. You know, and then you start bringing in rules and regulations to limit everything that we can do to try and make it safer. And yet all you do is you make it wind up being worse. Because now guys are trying to find ways to cheat the system.
Because they need, some drivers need to run.
Yeah.
Some drivers need to run.
We do. And unfortunately, not all of us can do the team driving. I've tried it once.
So it ain't for everybody.
No, it's not. The only way I could ever see myself doing team driving is if I was married to the person sitting next to me.
You gotta have that perfect person to drive.
But I tried it once with a buddy of mine, and he was the only one I was willing to do it with for the company that we were driving for, because I had known him for so many years prior. And we ended up doing a run from Edmonton, Alberta, out to Toronto, Ontario, and back. Neither one of us slept for the first 2.5 days. And we're taking 6-hour split shifts to try and get there because the truck can't stop. And we're still trying to get some rest in between, but we're single drivers. So now now you're forcing us to sleep in a moving vehicle. Your bodies don't do it.
Unless you're worn out.
Well, and that's why it took 2.5 days before either one of us got any sleep, because that's how long it took for our bodies to be completely done. And
then you can sleep with
that. Oh yeah, and then we got into the 6-hour shift rhythm and didn't have a problem falling asleep after that. But you know, it's not an easy life, and it's definitely not a life for everybody. Again, I absolutely love what I do. I love driving, I love traveling, and I love being able to see new places, which is why I got my license to begin with. If you can start there, you can go anywhere you want. My ultimate dream is to go to Australia and run the road trains. That is my ultimate dream. I don't know if it'll ever come true, but that is my ultimate dream. Just to say that I've done it once. I've already done the ice roads. Absolutely love that. People, what they see on TV is nothing even close to what it is.
I thought about trying once, but I was like, nah, I'm good with the Oilfield.
Honestly, safest roads I've ever been on.
Yeah. And you just gonna apply with a company up there, or?
Yeah.
So is it a certain season starts in September? Or?
Yeah, you'd find the companies that run the ice roads. You'd start applying probably about October, so that they can go through all the applications. You'd find out probably right around Christmas whether or not you got a job. And then you'd go through orientation the beginning of January. And then, well, so long as it freezes by then anyways, with how warm the winters have been lasting. It's hard to say. But you'd normally be up on the ice by the beginning of February at the latest. And that'll run until the end of March, halfway through April, if you're really lucky, till the end of April. So you really only have at most about a 2-month window.
That's not bad.
No. And you've got probably 10,000 guys up there. And you go in groups of minimum 2, that's the least they'll ever send, the maximum 6. And you just go in convoys. And you know, when you're actually on the water, it's I don't know the exact conversion because we're in kilometers, you guys are in miles. Up there for us, it's 25 kilometers an hour when you're loaded. On most lakes, on some you can go as fast as 30. When you're empty coming back, you can do 60. Not 60 miles an hour, 60 kilometers an hour. There's a big difference. But, you know, I absolutely had an entire blast going up there. And the people that you meet, the things that you're able to see and experience is once in a lifetime. If you get the opportunity to do it and you've always wanted to try, do it. Whether you like it or not, at least you say that you've done it, you tried it. It wasn't for me. Or I'll see you next year. You know, I would have loved to have gone back too, but I ended up in a relationship and she didn't want me gone that long. So, you know, I sacrificed going back up there so that I could be with the girl. And, you know, I'd still love to go back at one point and do it again because it's like nothing else. I just want to give a shout out to everybody within the trucking community. It doesn't matter whether you're running flatbeds, reefers, oil field, oversize, heavy haul, tankers. You know, it doesn't matter whether you're the driver, you're the girlfriend sitting at home taking care of the kids, you're the wife, you're the parent, you're the kid. You know, everyone be safe, take care, and hopefully at some point we'll see you driving down the highway.